Hello and good morning, everyone. We are going to be reading chapter 15 from Home Again this morning, but just a quick note on my shirt. I'm channeling my son-in-law today, who is a chemical engineer and got some exceptional news this week regarding his career, and that's his news to tell. But I wanted him and the world to know just how incredibly proud I am of him. Also, as you can see, it spells Gandalf, which is the name of my Westie, and Mayhem is based on Gandalf, who you will meet sometime probably next week, and he's wonderful. It also says elemental magic, and that's something I believe fundamentally in, as well as that most people are also fundamentally good. So, without further ado, let's get into chapter 15. I need something irresistible, Garrett said, speaking to his father face to face for the first time in over a year, and it needs to be chocolate. The absurdity of that statement wasn't lost on Garrett. He simply didn't care that he was being absurd. He'd deal with that later, when he didn't need to be irresistible. His father looked at him oddly for a second, like he wasn't fully comprehending Garrett's imminently reasonable request. Then his gaze looked down the hall from his office toward the kitchen. "You just missed her," he said, a sad kind of longing on his face. Garrett didn't question his father. He'd seen that look before. He'd worn it a time or two. His father was in lust. Good for him. Robert wasn't dead yet. If he wanted to dance naked and howl at the moon, Garrett wasn't one to judge. With any luck, Garrett would have his own reason to howl before the summer ended. "If the her you are referring to can help me with my chocolate problem, let's go find her." Robert looked at him oddly, like he was trying to decide what to do. Then he turned and gestured for Garrett to follow. As they made their way to the kitchen, Robert shot a quick look at him over his shoulder. Robert hesitated at the kitchen door. His hand rested gently against the wooden door, burnished a deep honey gold from use and loving care. "If you hear something like an angry bear growling, duck." Garrett raised his eyebrows at that, but followed his father into the kitchen anyway. Pleasing Poppy was worth risking projectiles aimed at his father's head. He grinned. Maybe he'd get dessert and a show. Whatever his father had done, he probably deserved whatever was thrown his way. Garrett wasn't sure what he expected, but he could never have conjured the beautiful, as promised, growling, dark-haired woman waving a rolling pin in Robert's general direction. Beth looked hell-bent on homicide. Robert held up his hands as Beth rounded the corner of the table and came at him. "Whoa now, Beth, calm down." Beth stopped mid-stride, cutting him off. "Robert Oakley, did you just tell me to calm down?" Robert squeezed his eyes shut and took a deep breath. "I didn't mean that." Garrett looked at his father, feeling strangely sorry for him. Robert had meant exactly what he said, and now he couldn't get out of it. For the first time since Robert had argued with Garrett's second mother, Garrett saw his father tongue-tied. Whatever Beth was, she meant far more to Robert than an object of desire. Leela, Garrett's second mother, had been able to twist Robert up, but to his knowledge, she'd never done so, brandishing a rolling pin. Beth put her hands on her perfectly rounded hips, managing to do it while still gripping the rolling pin. Her voice was deceptively calm when she said, "What exactly did you mean, Robert?" Garrett watched his father's shoulders drop before he stood up straight. Knowing, as men everywhere knew, that explaining himself would only serve to deepen the hole he was standing in, Robert changed the subject. He shot Garrett a quick look Garrett couldn't quite decipher. Then he looked Beth straight in the eye. There was no trace of apology in his voice when he said, "Garrett needs your help. He needs something chocolate, and it needs to be exceptional." "Irresistible," Garrett corrected. Something unsaid, yet felt by everyone in the room, passed between Robert and Beth. Irresistible, Robert said huskily, making Beth flush. She dropped her eyes for a second, then aimed her rolling pin directly at Robert. Fine. I'll help Garrett create something guaranteed to make one salivate, but you are not allowed in my kitchen while we're doing it. She looked at her watch. You should stay out of my way, Robert Oakley, until well past 6. She nodded at the young man who looked like he wanted to be anywhere but the kitchen. Jake and I will handle dinner tonight. Robert had been dismissed. It was clear by the look he shot toward Beth's turned back that he didn't like the experience, but was helpless to fight against it. Garrett had to give Robert credit. The man knew when retreat was a better part of valor. Robert nodded toward Garrett, a gesture that may have meant good luck or you're on your own, son. Perhaps both. Beth came up to Garrett, narrowed her eyes, looked him up and down, and said, Irresistible, huh? We have our work cut out for ourselves if that's your goal. Garrett didn't know if Beth was talking about him or the dessert they were about to create together. Robert didn't know how long he'd been staring at the spreadsheet on his laptop indicating where the Red Robin Inn was making profit, what needed to be improved, and what was turning out to be a loss before his cell sounded with the first few strains of Hakuna Matata. Astrid was calling him. Both the song and the fact that it meant Astrid was calling made Robert's heart warm, and he smiled. Astrid really did brighten even the cloudiest of days. Hi, honey, what can I do for you? Robert asked, relieved to be set to any task that didn't have to do with Beth. Astrid didn't bother with pleasantries. She just jumped right in, her whisper loud enough so anyone passing his open office would hear. Is our dastardly plan working? Robert face-palmed his forehead. This was one time he wished he hadn't devoted to increasing Astrid's working vocabulary. She was whip-smart, and he should have known better. Normal 7-year-olds didn't use the word dastardly in everyday conversation. If Poppy heard her, or worse, Garrett, then more than eyebrows would be raised. If either of them found out about the plan, then teaching Astrid the word dastardly would be the least of Robert's problems. Is Garrett staying in one of the cottages? Astrid asked in an even louder whisper when Robert didn't answer fast enough. Yes. Garrett's agent arranged it. Garrett wasn't happy about it, but he's staying, for now. We'll have to think of something to keep him near Mom. There was a short pause, followed by, and you, of course, when Garrett's flood is fixed. Astrid, honey, you don't have to whisper. Whispering makes people think you have something to hide. We do have something to hide, remember? That's why our plans are dastardly. Otherwise, they'd just be plans. Astrid spoke slowly, like she was trying to explain something complex to him. Robert didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He'd corrupted a soon-to-be third grader. He rubbed his brow, hoping that just once the ends would justify the means. But he knew he was tilting at windmills. Quite right, Astrid. We are hiding our plan. Better keep whispering. Just saying that made Astrid speak in her normal voice. Are you coming to dinner tonight? Mom said I could invite you. Then she added, I'm inviting you. It was obvious to Robert that even Astrid thought he was a dolt. Could they all be wrong? It was time to reevaluate his life. I don't know, Astrid. I'm not sure Garrett and me sitting at the same table so soon is a good idea. Robert could almost feel Astrid frowning through the phone. Aren't we doing all this to get Garrett in the same room with you? How can you fix what's wrong if you don't try when you can? Well, hell, Robert thought. What time is dinner? Robert asked, knowing he had to man up. He'd disappointed Garrett more than once. If he was going to embrace his inner Don Quixote, there was no way he was going to disappoint his Sancho Panza. Astrid made a gleeful sound, part laugh, part squeak. I knew you'd come. Because you know I'd do just about anything for you. Yep, and I'll do all I can to help you too. Robert was having trouble swallowing. See you tonight, Bug. So ends chapter 15. And I am still incredibly thankful that the Devon and Cornwall International Novel Prize has selected Home Again for their long list. So wish me well and good thoughts. Everyone send out, please, good thoughts for making the short list. Whether we do, whether we don't, I'm still incredibly grateful. And I'm grateful to you for spending this time with me. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Be well.